Hi there, everyone. I'm Holly Porter Morgan. I'm a Swim Coalition steering committee member and the director of the environmental science program at LaGuardia Community College. And I have the honor of being the moderator and facilitator here today. And with that honor comes actually introducing the very first group, which is from my college. So we have Sarah Durand, who will tell us about the fantastic program that she runs, and a number of students working with her. I'd ask that the students, when you introduce yourselves, can you tell what your major is, please? Sarah is in charge of the intertidal wetlands program and a couple of other programs, and she'll tell us about that. She's also an associate professor of biology at CUNY and part of the environmental science program. So take it away, Sarah and students.
Thank you, Holly. So I think what I'll do again is share this screen. Let's see, select a window, and there it is. And hopefully this brings it up for you. Is that visible to you folks? Okay, so we'll share with you what LaGuardia students have been doing for the past 10 plus years in the way of developing green infrastructure along the water side of the Newtown Creek bulkheads. Newtown Creek is the local estuary for the college. In fact, one of the buildings you can see the creek from, the main building, C building, you look out the back, and you're looking across Newtown Creek to Brooklyn. Now, what you see here is probably something like what the mouth of Newtown Creek emptying into the East River may have looked like about 500 years ago. A shallow waterway, meandering waterway, surrounded on each side by meadows of tidal marsh, stretching north into Queens, Long Island City, and south into Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And in these massive stems would have been billions of the shellfish, bivalve mollusk called ribbed mussels. And we'll be talking about ribbed mussels a bit, so I wanted to introduce you to them at the outset. Notice at the lower right, it gets its name from the fact that the shell isn't smooth, like the blue mussel you might see in a paella dish. And fortunately, they're not tasty at all. Fortunately, no one's tempted to take the mussels from Newtown Creek or anywhere else in the Hudson River estuary, because indeed they are still here. Now, unfortunately, the scene is less pleasant today along Newtown Creek. We have a built environment and a walled-in waterway. And what you're seeing is the terminal basin of the Dutch Kills tributary, the waterway over which the college has a view. And there, close in the center, you'll see these two gaping discharge points, and those constitute a major combined sewage overflow, which has since undergone upgrade. And in fact, the entire sewer shed into Newtown Creek will be transformed over the next several decades into a system that will withhold roughly 60% of what flows into the creek right now. So better days to come. Now, what do you do to start a program 10 plus years ago, a field program for students as a development of a new environmental science major at the college? Well, we reached out to Professor Greg O'Mullen, a recent hire at Queens College, who very much, unlike myself, was knowledgeable in these matters. I was actually coming from a background in neurobiology, although my undergraduate major was marine biology, but not my doctoral work. So I reached out to Greg, and he provided us guidance with equipment and protocols. And here you see one of the few locations where we had access to the waterway. On the left is the inlet to the terminal basin of Dutch Kills, where you see students with a beta bottle that allowed us to take water samples at specific depths, 1 meter, 2 meter, et cetera, And over on the right, we're at the promontory of the nature walk of the wastewater treatment plant, a region specifically designed for public access and acquired by public activism, primarily of the Greenpoint community. So there we're taking samples of dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity, and we take water samples back into the lab, assess them for levels of enterococcus, fecal bacterium, discharged by those sewer outfalls, those combined sewage overfalls you saw in the wall of the terminal basin of Dutch Kills. And no surprise to anybody, these are data that we acquired back in 2012 over the summer, sampling from the Dutch Kills terminus. And the blue line is our rainfall amounts, and the red line is the levels of enterococcus bacterium, which the DEP uses to determine the safety of the water. And so with every rainfall peak, you see the peak of the fecal bacterium enterococcus. And in fact, those peaks saturated the testing system that we're using. So we know it was over 24,000 per 100 mils of water. Very badly polluted water. And no surprise, those same blue peaks showing peak rainfalls are associated with minima values, hypoxic, apoxic values for dissolved oxygen, meaning that the influx of nutrients along with those fecal bacteria, all that organic matter, was a banquet for whatever bacteria are in the water. They undergo a population explosion. And of course, those bacterial cells use up the oxygen as they decompose the organic matter in the combined sewage overflow. Okay, now one of the our early visits to the nature walk, in the back you see that promontory where we were taking samples of the water. And the nature walk has this wonderful feature of these steps, intertidal steps. I call them intertidal because the tide rises and falls against the steps. You can actually walk to the water. And you see the waterfowl that we have in the water. So what I had heard initially about Newtown Creek couldn't have been true at all. There's life in that water, lots of life. Okay, so these great egrets are there for the fish, and the ducks are there for the vegetation. Now, if you look carefully at the steps, you will see that they're triangular cutouts. And one of our first visits to the steps, we were accompanied by a student who was taking a class in photography from Scott Sternbach, wonderful nature photographer who has had his work shown at the American Museum of Natural History. She was walking the steps while we were preoccupied with the sampling. And at one point she said, "Professor, come over here, quick." And we paused, all of us, the field interns and I, walked over to where she was looking, and she was looking down into one of these triangles. And lo and behold, there they are. The rib mussels that I showed you in their natural habitat somehow were surviving without any cordgrass at all in these, which were essentially sediment traps. So there was enough sediment so that the animals could burrow with their foot and maintain themselves in the mud. And it was just a fantastic discovery. So as we looked at all of these little triangle cutouts, we realized that they were oases for life of the intertidal zone, largely missing because the intertidal zone was now mostly the surface of these walls along the waterway, walls of concrete, walls of sheets, a sheet pile bulkhead. So we really, where is the living space for the intertidal community? Not much left, but you give it a toehold and there it is. So we did some literature search on the rib mussel. And just 2 years prior to our discovering it on the intertidal steps of the Nature Walk, this article was published documenting the fact that these animals are a foundation species for the intertidal community of life that I was just referring to. If a cordgrass ultimately colonizes an estuary flat, the rib mussels soon follow, providing a solid substrate, little cavities for small crustaceans and fish to hide in, for small animals to reproduce in, for animals that need a solid substrate to settle upon, the barnacles, the anemones, the sponges, the tunicates. So this awakened the possibilities. What if we could actually bring back some of the cordgrass, living space for the mussels, and then everybody else would follow? It so happened a wonderful opportunity was concurrent with our observation. The president of the college at the time, Gail Mello, sent an email saying, Long Island City and Greenpoint were just awarded an environmental benefits grant for Newtown Creek because of violations of the Clean Water Act from the old water treatment plant. Whoa, we could put in a proposal. So what you're seeing is one of the images I submitted with this proposal for how to bring back some of the marsh habitat to a waterway that was mostly walled in. What do? Well, use the walls somehow. And so fortunately, well, what you're seeing first is the view from those intertidal steps. The view on the left is the old concrete bulkhead, property owned by the MTA, the wheel spur yard, I think it's called. And then what we'd like to see covering that old concrete bulkhead. And what we proposed, fortunately, I had met an engineer who was able to present engineered, professionally designed plans for using the bulkhead as a support on which you could top load basins of grass and simply cover the bulkhead, whether it is sheet pile, metal, wood, concrete. You could top load those basins so that you're not pulling out from the wall, you're pressing down on it, and fill those basins with sediment and grass. Well, we were fortunate. Community votes in Long Island City and Greenpoint voted to move the project forward for funding. The DEC and the State Attorney General for New York voted that it was a reasonable project and should go forward. It was all quite amazing. I could dream. And there, once we had the funding, we were able to contract with Hammersmith, a metal fabricator that has done some of the work on the High Line. And you see one of these metal basins that were fabricated, and 2 LaGuardia students are cutting landscape fabric in which they're going to place that fabric as a liner prior to placing sandy sediment and Spartina alterniflora plugs, cordgrass plugs, that we acquired from the Greenbelt Native Plant Center out in Staten Island, which is the source of native plants for New York City parks. And there we are, 2014. I must tell you, this was a kind of off-the-books operation. I spent, along with Carter Kraft, who some of you may know, one of the founders of the then Metropolitan Waterfront Alliance, it's now the Waterfront Alliance. He was appointed project manager by the City Parks Foundation, who was administering the award of the Environmental Benefits Grant. And Carter and I spent about a year and a half, 2 years, trying to get the DEC to give us a permit for the project they gave us money for. It was a rather odd situation. Finally, we gave up. And at that time, a man by the name of Jim Pinn, exceptional engineer and community activist all in one, was supervisor of the plant. And we told him that we would like to mount some of these basins that would restore the natural vegetation of the tidal marsh to the shore of the waterway. And he looked into it, thought the fabricator was good, the plan was good. He said, yeah, you just go ahead. And we did. Okay, and there you see students, you see Willis Elkins in the far upper right, I'm afraid he's a bit obscured by the word basins. And you see LaGuardia interns working to plant the basins that Carter arranged to have installed. And that's in 2014. 3 years later, we never had to replant. The grasses were happy. It was their natural environment and they thrived. So these are here today. Notice that you don't see those frames for top loading the basins, and that's because along this bulkhead, there is a submerged I-beam on which we could place the basins and simply chain the basins, attaching them to the I-beam and therefore to the bulkhead. One thing we learned this summer is that we should have used stainless steel chain. Because I was walking along there one day, and this is the walk along Whale Creek of the DEP Nature Walk. And I noticed that that basin in the center, that beautiful basin, was not there. And there was just a gap. And the chain had completely rusted away. We hadn't been paying attention. And we now have stainless steel chain basins. The basin was replaced, still sitting there along the bulkhead of the Nature Walk. Now, we then moved on. We expanded operations again to city property, again on the tacit approval of the manager of what you see is the old marine transfer station of the Department of Sanitation. And you see on the left, Carter Kraft with his orange hat and student interns. The wonderful aspect of the grant, it allowed us to provide both student internships as well as materials for the purchase and installation of the basins. This allowed us to serve many more students than we were serving prior to the award, wherein we relied upon programs such as the NIH Bridges undergraduate research program, local programs that had been at the college. But now the Environmental Benefits Grant allowed us to serve more students. This, again, was a successful operation. There you have chain suspended basins, but we hadn't learned our lesson at that point. Those are still galvanized steel chains. Big mistake, we lost one of these basins. And to an errant barge that broke loose from Morocco and simply scooped one up and passed it off to the bottom. So we're now -2. I think we still have 4 along this bulkhead. You learn as you go. Now, during this time, the NCA, Newtown Creek Alliance, spearheaded by Willis Elkins, developed what we call the living dock. In fact, you can see the little plaque down there in the lower right. A wonderful initiative wherein a dock is constructed with cavities into the water, wherein you can place crates of substrate of shell, rock, fiber, materials that would have been present along the original habitat, but are now gone, long gone. But as we know, the larvae that inhabited the community where these habitats were available, the larvae are in the water. And once you provide them with living space, they come back. There they are. So what you see is we're just replacing a basin that has become covered. Notice it's a little community in itself. We're putting back a basin that I think contained oyster shell, but you see that the hard space available is covered by algae, tunicates, anemones, sponges, little worms, little crustaceans hanging out amongst the forest of algae. And we have just released the swimmers, the folks, the swimming organisms that were hanging out into that white basin. And I think maybe we can zoom in. You see that there are quite a few guys here hanging out in these little habitat oases. I think this is a skillet
Sarah?
fish. Yeah.
Sarah, we've got like just over 5 minutes left for your group.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh.
I know it goes so fast when you're talking about things you love. I think you should skip ahead if you want to.
I'm going to skip. Okay.
Floating wetlands design.
Yep. So this gave us the idea of building some grass rafts with cavities just for the grasses. There they are. There's one being lowered, and you see one of those ubiquitous oil sheens where it is. There we have students who are measuring the cordgrass plugs that we just got from the Native Plant Center. And in the back, in 2018, this photograph was from 2019, were the first pilot grass rafts. And you see that they regrew just like the basins of grass on the bulkhead, and how beautifully they are doing there at the end of this bulkhead. And there they are being measured by, there's Ocean and Isabella. We came up with the idea that, geez, if we have platforms, we can put planters on those platforms for herbaceous plants. And there you see two students doing just that. And this season, we actually planted the plank platforms on either side of the grass cavities with vegetation that you expect to find, upland vegetation, high marsh vegetation. And we completed that project at the end of the summer. And then we also, in 2020, we came up with the idea that maybe we don't need any sediment, any plastic crates. Maybe we can do an all natural floating grass island and just have the plants with their roots sitting in the water. And here is the first design. Harry and Jacob put together a wood shipping pallet, ubiquitous. You see them all over the place outside big box stores. They have done this amazing design of putting a woven bottom bamboo fragments. What do you call those? I can't say the word for them right now, but pieces of bamboo are woven between dowels for which they drilled holes. And then they placed glass, again, a recyclable object, natural decomposing, for flotation. But it's beautiful, essentially work of art, but difficult and long to construct. There it is in the water, but it proved the point that the following year, there it is, those grasses regrew by themselves, never in any sediment. They can grow directly in the water. And now we have a new design for our grass island. We are not going to do that amazing, beautiful weave that worked, but takes a long time. And we need something simple that perhaps high school students could produce. So I'm going to turn this over at this point to Konstantinos Iliopoulos, who developed a new design using all biodegradable materials, locally sourced. So I can stop for now, and maybe we can bring up Konstantinos. He
Hello.
is, there he is.
Hello, my name is Konstantinos Iliopoulos. I'm a civil engineering student. So I'm gonna try to present you our new design for the floating grass wetland. We have already created a prototype. You will see it later in the PowerPoint. First, I'm gonna show you the blueprints that we have created in order to show step by step how to create these wetlands. So I'm gonna try to share my screen. Okay.
Sarah, you will have to stop. Oh, good. All right, we're all set.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So as you can see here, this is the pallet itself. So in order to provide this pallet with more flotation and, in order to carry all this weight from the plant, etc., we came up with an idea to put like cork layers in between these wood boards. So we used the cork sheet that they are using in the constructions for flooring. So our idea was to compress these cork layers. These yellow here are the cork layers. These brown rectangulars here are the woods. So we placed 14 sheets, cork sheets here, and we compressed them by using a stainless steel bolt with the nut and washer. So this provides us with more flotation. Then, in order to prevent the trash to come into our wetland, we came up with an idea to put like a wooden fence all around the corners. And this is what you see here with the gray color. And then because we had the problem with the geese that they were eating our grasses, we came up with an idea to put a chicken wire fence. And this is here with a purple color. We put these wooden rods, and then we place the fence all around the corners. So this is pretty much our design. We haven't planted them yet, but we hope at the end of the June they will be planted. So this is it for me. Thank you very much. I think, Professor, you can continue with the presentation and you can show the images of our prototype.
Yeah, I'll quickly show them.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, Sarah, we have to move on to the next presenter. So if you want just like 2 minutes to wrap up, and we'll have to move on. Sorry.
Yeah, I misunderstood how much time we had.
It's okay.
So I don't need to, I think what I'd like, maybe invite another student just to say we have one other project ongoing right now, and that is actually kelp aquaculture, which, Nick, if you want to speak just a couple minutes about it.
Sorry, just really quickly, what I'll say is I'll put all the students and yourself, Sarah, on the screen so everybody knows who the team is. And Nicholas, you can start speaking. And then once you're done, the spotlight will show on all of you.
Okay, well, I don't want to take up too much time. Professor Hawley did invite me to do a presentation at a quarterly swim coalition meeting too. So if you guys want to move on, I can wait and do that presentation, and everybody can come to that swim quarterly meeting.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah. Okay, what I can do, I can just briefly share my screen again, and Caitlin and Colin, if you want to jump in just to say the final, I can show the final product in the water. And let's see.
Yeah, why don't you just show the final product? And
yeah, I don't see the option to, oh, yes, here it is. Okay. No, wrong, no. Block. No. So, oh, I just messed up. Maybe I can't.
Maybe it's because we're all on spotlight. Let me remove the spotlight, but this is the team. It's working. This.
I think I no longer can share my screen. It's a frozen.
I think it's because you're all spotlighted.
Did that come up now?
We can see.
Okay, so there it is actually being, let's see, this is, being constructed, and there it is, surviving the flotation test with a heavy bucket of water. And that's the final design right there. And we're going to put plugs in that burlap stuffed with, Caitlin, do you want to say what it's stuffed with? What we're standing there, what are we doing there? If you can just speak up, what you're seeing is there's Konstantinos on the left, Caitlin center, Colin on the right, and this is over by Plank Road on Newtown Creek. And we just cut down a whole lot of vegetation, and that vegetation is going to be in that burlap, in those burlap bags. But the idea for this type of thing really came from Caitlin, who's been working with NYC H2O. Is that the right? Do I have the right organization? I finally remembered. Right. Can't hear you, Caitlin. Are you muted?
You got it right. Yep.
Oh, in any case, so Caitlin had the idea of using the Phragmites that is being cut down in her work to provide kind of stuffing material to maintain the plugs instead of the original coconut fiber material that we had stuffed the original pilot with. That's not a local material, but everyone wants to get rid of Phragmites and everyone wants to get rid of bamboo. So between the upper and lower set of planks on that shipping pallet, we're just going to stuff our burlap bags with vegetation that people don't want, and it should be fine.